This is the most effective treatment that's ever been shown in treating the leading cause of death and disability, which is high blood pressure. It also reduces insulin resistance. It can enhance cognitive capacities, and you also see it affecting things like depression and anxiety. It's called fasting. And there's more. Fasting introduces not just a chance to lose weight, it also mobilizes visceral fat, which is the fat around the belly and the organs, which is giving off inflammatory products that's causing heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and many people are maintaining higher visceral fat than what they should be. So I've spent 40 years helping people get healthy, and I can tell you that I think you should be fasting every day.
So tell me about that then. But also, isn't the game here just to not eat as much?
Well, here's the problem.
Dr. Alan Goldhammer is a pioneering physician.
Thousands of people reverse chronic disease,
eliminate medication,
your health using one of the most ancient healing tools known to humanity.
Today, we live in a world designed to make you fat, sick, and miserable, where 76% of people are overweight or obese, and where people think that health comes from pills, potions, and powders. And yet most of us are ignorant of the proven health benefits of fasting. In fact, if you look at all the chemical changes that happen with exercise, they also happen with fasting. Things like increase in BDNF, a neurochemical protecting the brain from Alzheimer's disease.
And what about water fasting?
So people that have not been successful resolving their conditions with medications, including patients with polycystic ovarian syndrome, have been profoundly affected by water fasting. And we'll go through fabulous research. But one thing you want to realize is that all human beings have the capacity to fast.
Okay, so let's run through the unique selling points versus any other diet or intervention.
Let's do it.
Hello and God bless you. Grand rising, what a beautiful day it is. The good Lord has made. Let us be glad and rejoice in it. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? It's good to see y'all here this morning. Good to see y'all here this morning. We are in the building October 23rd, 2020. Fizzy. Oh, I mean, October is over. Y'all know what happens next? November. Then it's over. That's a whole year gone. Woo. You need sound. You need sound. Okay. We good. We good in the hood. We good. All right. Yeah, I couldn't get my music to play this morning. Know what was going on. Thanks for the love. Thanks, Tanya, for keeping it 100. Trying to make sure that we good over here and everybody can see what needs to be seen or hear what needs to be heard. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Yes. All right. Y'all like, share, subscribe if you can. It's not too hard. I'm gonna tell y'all something. I am leaning more towards probably going straight to like futures instead of just staying with Forex. Still gonna do some Forex every now and again, but still in the futures. I'll still have my Forex if people want to do that. I may still even put in my Forex trades, but just think it's, smoother, faster to get to the TPs. The market just moves faster. So I like it. Sunshine. Tanya Sunshine is saying Grand Rising to you. Thank you for the like. Thank you for the thumb up. All right. So like we stuck over here. I don't know what happened. All right. got that word on there. I don't know if y'all saw that good word. Let's get that out here, y'all. This word is coming from Isaiah 41:10 NIV. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Righteous. All right. Let's get in. Let's get in. Let's get in. Let's see if we can check out and see what's newsing in the market today. All right, over here looking pretty good. We had some 3 a.m. nothing, nothing, nothing. 8:45, nothing, nothing. And then 1:15, we've got CAD red folder, category two, category two, category three red folder for USD at 2:30. So look out for that. And then some orange folder for CAD at 4 p.m. And in other news, bring out the red. Oh, was it red? It was beet red. The market was bleeding this morning. Y'all see this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whew, take a break. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 red folders. All at 7:30. Right? But we're still here. We survived. So we have more red folder news at 9 o'clock. Two of them for USD. And then it's going to be some Lyman's. And then in 8 hours, AUD is going to drop some red folder news. 8 hours and 53 minutes, more like 9 hours. And then JPY is going to drop some red folder in 10 hours. They'll also have some orange folder news too. And then we've got oranges. So we got some Skittles going on. Y'all want colors? There you go. It's going to be some volatility in the markets today. I tell you that. All right, so let's see what it looks like. I want to see what happened at 7:30. I just want to see. I just want to see some USD stuff. Oh, this was yesterday. We did hit TP on USHF. We got TP on USHF. Then NZD USD just played around. I mean, it dropped down, hit our line, came back up. It's kind of, so that was good that it didn't continue to go past this point. And then now it's just back, just consolidating and struggling to get back up here. So maybe opening bell, we could see this push through. We'll see what happens there. All right. But this is US. So at 7:15, 7:37, might have been here. So I don't see 19 or 15 red folders worth of movement here. I don't see that. See what JPY did. So there's some stuff here. This was some movement. So 7:25, 7:30 here. Boom. News didn't look good for USD, just kind of dropped. But I would think there would be more with 15 red folders. All right. See what happened with we're trading the Russell. See what happened with the Russell. And we can go in and do some gold too if y'all want to do that. It's cool. Whatever, gas, oil, doesn't matter. Whatever you want to trade. So again, let's move some of this out the way. Yeah, again, at 7, I don't see the big deal. At 7:30, what happened? So, I don't know. Right, wrong, roll, Raggy. Right, wrong, roll. Thank you for the tea. All right, all right, all right. Take it back down to 2. Ooh. Excuse me, just a little yarny this morning here. So we have until 9 o'clock, I think, before we get red folder for USD, and that could be, what the market is essentially waiting on. Yeah, got two red folders there. So, all right, team, what you thinking? What you want to look at? What y'all see? Somebody see something. Somebody say something. I'll go look at it. You call it, I trade it. Say that. Go ahead. Call it out. Call it out. You call it, and I'll trade it.
Hey, take a look. Hey,
Well,
take a
there we
look.
go. Hey, take a look. Russell is calling us, and I don't want to be rude and ignore the Russell, you know.
Hey, take a look.
What? Let's go in. Let's just jump over here to 3. Russ is here. Hey, Russ, what you got going on? Russ says, take a look. What does it say? Russell says, take a buy. All right, Russell, you sure? Russ says take a buy. I don't, if the system says it, right? I thought we had something on here. There we go. See, should have been in already. Should have been in already. There's an entry. There's a TP. All right, can't be playing with Rush. You got to do a market execution. You got to just drop it and do a modify, and come back and lock it in. I mean, if you look at this move, this may be one that you could take up to easy. I would say this could probably easily go up to your brick wall. Huh. Just whatever, just whatever. Yeah, market. $2,473.4. Yes. I think there, and it may be a good place for a turnaround. I think we may turn around, get that, and then turn around, smash. Let me see what that is. Yeah, we're not even really seeing that much. It's more like 14 points. I would watch this one. My bigger bet for this would be a sell stop. If you haven't jumped in on this one, I would probably wait for a sell stop. That's a smaller move up above. This would give you more here. Excuse me? I don't know. Mystery. I say when you get some profit with the Russell on this move, make sure you lock it in. So we're in profit now. Just make sure when you get a decent amount of profit that you lock it in. Sunshine.
I see messages all the time in the comment section that some of you didn't realize you didn't subscribe. So if you could do me a favor and double check if you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's the free thing that anybody that watches this show frequently can do to help us here, to keep everything going in this show in the trajectory it's on. So please do double check if you subscribed, and thank you so much, because in a strange way, you're part of our history and you're on this journey with us, and I appreciate you for that. So yeah, thank you. Dr. Alan Goldhammer. My first question is, who are you and what have you spent the last 4 decades of your life doing, and why?
Yeah, I've spent my entire life really focused on one topic, and that's this idea that, health results from healthful living. I got interested really young. I was in elementary school, and I had decided that I wanted to pursue this as a career. And when I finished training in the United States, I had an opportunity to go to Australia, and I studied with a guy named Alec Burton, who was the world's leading expert in the use of medically supervised water-only fasting. And I saw things there that weren't supposed to be happening. People were getting better. I saw people with chronic diseases like high blood pressure resolving their hypertension, getting off the medications. And so we began to carefully evaluate patients with hypertension. In this study, 174 consecutive patients with high blood pressure and 174 people normalized their blood pressure without the need for medication. After we published that paper, we went on and we've published a couple dozen papers now on the use of diet and fasting in the literature, and we've written a book. It's called Can Fasting Save Your Life, which summarizes our work and other people's work on this use of fasting to help the body do what it really does best, and which is heal itself if you get out of the way.
So fasting, the word has become incredibly popular, but there's a variety of different types of fasting. So what is the type of fasting that you spend most of your time doing, working on, administering to patients?
Right. Well, fasting is the complete abstinence of all substances in an environment of complete rest.
So what does that mean?
That means that you're actually resting while you're fasting in order to get fasting to be most effective. And the reason is, if you're very active when you're fasting, your body has to produce more glucose in order to carry on the extramuscular and brain activity. And the only way that it does that after glycogen is
TP smash on the Russell.
is through a
TP
process called
smash on the
gluconeogenesis, where the
Russell.
body breaks down lean tissue. So when you're fasting, if your goal is to maximize
Please pick up your winnings at the front desk. Please pick up your winnings at the front desk for the Russell. Thank you.
fat loss and minimize lean tissue loss, it's important that resting be a part of the protocol. It's true, if people are more active when they're fasting, they'll lose more weight, but that extra weight won't be fat, it'll be lean tissue.
So what happens to the body when someone fasts? And can you give me like an hour by hour or a play by play in terms of what actually is the sort of physiological sequence of events that are beneficial for one's health?
So it's a really interesting, fairly well studied and complex physiological adaptation that human beings make to fasting. Normally, your brain burns glucose.
Which is what I get if I have a piece of bread or a bar of chocolate.
Or if you break down protein.
Hey, take a
which can also
look.
break down into
Hey,
glucose,
hey,
which is
take
what
a
happens
look.
after 24 hours of fasting.
Hey,
You've depleted
take
your
a look.
glycogen stores, the sugar stores in your muscles. And so then the body, in order to get the glucose it needs, has to either convert to burning fat or break down muscle in order to form glucose. What the human being does is it converts its main burner of glucose, which is the brain, from burning sugar to burning fat. Now, if it didn't do that, you could fast about a week, you'd enter starvation, deplete your protein stores, and you'd starve to death. Because you can convert your brain to burning fat instead of sugar, a 70-kilogram male can fast about 70 days. Now, that doesn't mean they should fast 70 days, but they could fast up to 70 days because your main burner of glucose, your brain, will convert to burning a completely different fuel, which is fat.
So let me see if I've got this correct. So if I'm on a typical American diet, I'm going to be eating lots of things and my body's going to be breaking that down into this fuel source called glucose. If I stop eating the glucose, my body has this sort of evolutionary switch where it's going to start burning my fat and turning that into this thing called ketones, which my brain can run on as well.
That's correct. And you have about 24 hours of glycogen stores or sugar stores in your muscles, in your liver. So when you stop eating, For the first 24 hours, you're still able to produce glucose from your glycogen stores. But once you've depleted your glycogen stores, now you're stuck. You either burn fat or you break down lean tissue. Now, because the human brain is so ridiculously large, I mean, it's 2.5 times a chimp's brain, it's a huge glucose burning machine. You had to have a way of being able to use some kind of other fuel for that brain. Otherwise, the first time spring comes late, all the human beings would have died.
Mm-hmm.
And so this biological adaptation was clearly important for our survival, in large part because we have disproportionately large brains that burn, ridiculous amounts of glucose.
Just because the body does it as a survival mechanism doesn't posit that it's necessarily healthy though, right?
Absolutely. And what we've done, though, is we've taken this biological adaptation, which by definition would be, something the body's capable of doing safely and efficiently, and utilizing it in a very unusual situation. And that's where people have consistently been exposed to dietary excess. In the world of our ancient ancestors, getting enough to eat and not getting eaten was the biological imperative of life. It was difficult to get enough to eat. In fact, most human beings that were born, modern humans, probably didn't live to reproduce. They didn't pass on their DNA. We're the results of the winners. Most people, starvation, predation, had all kinds of challenges that would prevent people from reaching reproductive age. Taking a biological adaptation, something that's natural to the body, and applying it in a situation where people had consistent exposure to dietary excess.
When you say dietary excess, you mean too much calories?
Too much calories. In fact, the diseases that we suffer today, the heart disease, the diabetes, the autoimmune diseases, some of the cancer, these used to be rare conditions that were called the diseases of kings. It was the wealthy elite kings that could consistently overeat, that would get the gout, that would get the heart disease. These weren't common conditions that were present for the peasants. These were rarefied conditions. They've become common conditions because now people are consistently being exposed to dietary excess. And more importantly, we're fooling our brain satiety mechanisms into overeating by putting chemicals in our food. And as a consequence, we have a situation today where 76% of people are overweight or obese. And the extra fat comes with something called visceral fat. It's the fat that tends to accumulate around the belly and the organs. And it's pro-inflammatory, hypermetabolic, hypertrophic. It acts like a tumor. You have people walking around there, maybe they have 20 pounds of extra adipose tissue. They have 2 pounds of visceral fat. And that visceral fat is giving off inflammatory products that's causing heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune diseases. And what's weird is these conditions are treated as if they're completely independent, unrelated conditions. You have to go to a different kind of doctor to be even diagnosed and treated with these conditions. And yet they all seem to be associated with dietary excess, excess fat, excess visceral fat, and the inflammation that's associated with that visceral fat.
Let's run through what happens inside the body when I start fasting. And then I want to talk about fasting in a little bit more specifics. But what's going on in the body? So you said in the first sort of 24 hours, 48 hours, my body is going to switch from using glucose as a fuel source to ketones.
It's going to predominantly shift the brain, and liver muscles are going to begin shifting. It's a progression depending on your glycogen stores. So that, within 16 hours, 24 hours, up to 48 hours, in that transition, you'll be going from burning almost exclusively glucose in the brain to burning predominantly byproducts of fat metabolism, ketones, and specifically beta-hydroxybutyric.
Coming up on 8:30, you'll be able to see market should do some movement. Opening bell in 2 minutes. See if the market starts to move. Still got to look out for this 9 o'clock news for USD as well. That could make the market jump around. So let's keep our eyes open.
Acid.
Is that basically keto?
Ketones break down into different components. Beta-hydroxybutyric acid becomes the predominant fuel of the brain. It's a byproduct of fat metabolism.
Okay.
And the higher your beta-hydroxybutyric acid is, the more BDNF is produced. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is neurochemical that's thought to be protective in the brain from oxidative damage. So that can result in things like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And they do rat studies. Rats in a cage, 30 rats, both cages, everything's identical. They give half the rats a wheel. The rats with the wheel will run on the wheel, and they don't get Alzheimer's disease. And they said, why? What is it about the exercise that's preventing these rats from getting oxidative damage in their brain that results in dementia or Alzheimer's type disease? And they found out it was BDNF. It's dramatically higher with exercise. It also goes up with fasting. In fact, it's interesting, if you look at all the cardiometabolic improvements that happen with exercise, the chemical changes that they also happen with fat. And that's not intuitively obvious, because in fasting, you're resting, and exercise, you're vigorous. You might say, what do these two seemingly unrelated phenomena have in common? And
All right, taking a look over here at GBP CAT. We'll put in a sell stop right here with the catter. And I don't even know if it matter, but I'm gonna put a trade in with the catter. GBP catter. Entry is going to be 1.86611. 1.86611. TP is going to be 1.86504. 1.86504.
what I think is going on is that both exercise and fasting undo the consequences of dietary excess. They reduce the fat, specifically the visceral fat, and the inflammation that leads to all these different diseases. Every time you look at the benefits of exercise, you oftentimes see these corollaries with fasting.
And at some point in this fasting process, your body moves into a state of autophagy. I've heard that word a few times.
Yeah.
What is that?
So autophagy or autophagy is how the body gets rid of senescent cells and waste products and cancer cells, and it kind of eats up that debris and does the housekeeping. And there's some things that increase autophagy, and one of those things is fasting. If you take rodents, for example, and you let them eat ad libitum, they live as much as they want. They will live to a certain amount of time. If you take those rats and you periodically fast them, you can increase their lifespan from 30% to 100%, even though the diet's the same, just with periodic fasting or with systematic underfeeding. If you limit, instead of giving them as much to eat as they want, you feed them at 60% of what they would eat if they ate unlimited amounts, and you can dramatically increase their lifespan. It's an interesting way of looking at it. From my viewpoint, though, they're looking at it wrong. It's not that fasting doubles your lifespan. It's overfeeding cuts it in half.
Mm-hmm.
By overfeeding the rodents, they're developing fat, visceral fat, they get the inflammation, and you cut their lifespan in half. So what fasting is doing is allowing them to live their full span by getting rid of the consequences of dietary excess.
So isn't the game here then just to not eat as much versus fasting?
Absolutely. The idea is to avoid excess intake that results in excess fat, that results in excess visceral fat. The problem is it's very difficult to do that when they are putting chemicals in your feed that fool your satiety mechanisms and lead to overeating.
Satiety mechanisms being mechanisms that tell you whether you're hungry or not.
Right, whether your brain signals you accurately that the amount of calories you have. If you, for example, just sit down and eat your fill.
Setting up a buy stop here on Euro JPY. Buy stop on Euro JPY. Entry. It's looking like 177.169. 177.169. TP is looking like 177.270. 177.270. I think we are in on the Russell. We are in on GBP CAD. Oh, it came down and hit this one, but it hasn't. Wow. Did y'all see that? Out of nowhere. Disrespectful. Sleepy Bear just came and smacked me right in the face. Mainly in my eyes. Like, grabbed my eyelids and then just started hanging on them. All right, let me finish playing this video because this is disrespectful. I'm not going to take this.
Of whole plant foods. You eat a certain amount and then you feel full. But if you put certain chemicals in the feed, you'll eat significantly more before you trigger those satiety mechanisms and feel full. Those chemicals that we put in our food are salt, oil, and sugar. Salt, oil, and sugar are not food. They're hyperconcentrated components derived from food that are put back into food. And we put them into food to make food taste better. And what tasting better actually means is it results in more stimulation of dopamine in your brain. Dopamine is the neurochemical associated with pleasure. The more dopamine, the more pleasure, the more you like it. And so it turns out that higher caloric density foods, or foods that have chemicals like salt, oil, and sugar in the food, will stimulate more dopamine in the brain. And that's because your brain evolved in an environment of scarcity. It evolved where it was difficult to get enough to eat and avoid being eaten. And so richer foods had more value. And so the people that recognize the value of more concentrated foods tend to live to reproduce and pass on their DNA. Today, we live in a world where we've corrupted the whole system. And so now we have unlimited amounts of hyperconcentrated foods with these chemicals like salt, oil, and sugar. So when you eat those foods, you will overeat. The only question is how much and what are the consequences?
Should we be intermittent fasting or should we just be restricting our calories? Are they the same thing?
Well, there's different tools available to allow for us to eat ad libitum, but still meet optimum nutritional intake. One tool is intermittent fasting, that is, or time-restricted feeding, which we've practiced for 40 years, which is basically don't eat 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed at night. So instead of eating right up to the time you go to sleep, you withhold calories after the last meal so that you have 3 to 4 hours of fasting every day. That gives you a 12-hour fast every day. And if you're trying to lose weight, some people believe you could extend that fasting period another 4 hours in the morning, do some exercise in the morning, preferentially burning fat. And so that would give you a 16-hour fast and limit your feeding window to 8 hours.
And what's the benefit of that?
Some people find by limiting the feeding window, they can limit some of the overeating. That a lot of eating is being done for reasons other than being hungry. Sometimes people at night, they've had a big dinner and now they're eating additional food, not necessarily because they're hungry, but because they're bored, they're tired, or they're fatigued. And sometimes when they're fatigued and they eat and they feel stimulated, they think, oh, they must have been hungry, when in reality they were tired. Our suggestion is when you're tired, go to sleep. And when you're bored, engage in productive activities. And when you're hungry, then you eat. And if you limit your feeding window to 8 hours, some people find that it's a helpful tool at minimizing some of the overeating. Now, it's not going to work for everybody. If you have very high caloric needs, you're a competitive athlete, 8 hours feeding window, particularly on high nutrient density, low caloric density foods, may not give you enough feeding window in order to get the calories that you need. When you're trying to burn 3,500, 4,000 calories a day on very low caloric density foods, you may need to have a 12-hour feeding window in order to be able to get the calorie density need. But for most of us that are trying to maintain or lose weight, having a narrow feeding window may prove to be of some benefit.
When I'm in a ketogenic diet, or when I guess I'm fasted, which is very rare, why is it that my cognitive performance seems to be significantly better? Because when people have heard me say this so many times, but it's so true. When I'm eating, a normal Western diet, my ability to articulate myself and think and be creative seems to be diminished. Whereas when I'm avoiding carbohydrates and sugar, I seem to be able to think and talk better?
I think, again, it may not be that the ketones are helping you think better. It may be that the sugar vacillations are interfering with your cognitive function. For example, when people eat particularly refined carbohydrates, their insulin levels go up, drive the sugar down, they end up with low blood sugar levels, which can interfere with cognitive function as a consequence of this vacillation that's taking place with their blood sugar levels between insulin and glucose. When you go on a ketogenic type of an approach, or you're in a fasting state, everything's very stable as far as glucose is concerned and insulin is concerned.
Okay, so you don't want to be on the sugar roller coaster if you're doing important work.
Being stable seems to help people in their cognitive function. So,
people talk a lot about juice fasting. And I don't know, there's something about when people say that they're on a juice fast, I always think, oh, God, you're going to be missing important nutrients. You're not going to be getting the same quantity of protein necessarily. Maybe, I don't know, your gut microbiome is going to pay the price if you're restricting yourself from having certain things. Is juice fasting advisable? Is it a healthy approach?
So juice fasting isn't technically fasting, because fasting is the complete abstinence of all substances. It's a modified form of eating. So it's a diet that's high in sugar, very low in fiber, virtually no fiber on these juices. Where it can be helpful is people that are trying to make dietary changes, and they're addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain that comes from the use of their highly refined diets. They're trying to make a change, they're trying to make a break. And because it's sweet and very appealing, they'll drink the juices, they'll get their 600 or 800 calories, they'll feel relatively satiated, and it allows them to avoid the greasy, fatty processed foods that sometimes they're trying to get away from. Personally, I think that water fasting has advantages over juice fasting in terms of the magnitude of the detoxifying effect, the impact that it has. But the advantages to juice fasting, or what they call juice fasting, is that it can be done without modifying medications. You're still in a feeding physiology. It can be done safely by people without having to be in a controlled setting like you would for water fasting. So there's advantages to the intermittent or modified fasting approaches. It's not the basis of the research that we've published, which is actually water-only fasting. We're fasting people on water only from 5 to 40 days.
5 to 40 days. So tell me about that then. So who exactly would you prescribe a 40-day water fast to? And presumably in those 40 days, they have nothing but water.
Right.
Hey,
Patients that are
take a
fasting
look.
in our
Hey,
facility
take a look.
are on
Take a look.
fractionally steamed
Take a
distilled
look.
water only. That's the only thing they take. They're not taking supplements, medications.
What is that fractionally?
Oh, it's, distilled water. So it's purified water, highly purified water. So in our case, we're using distillation. Some people use reverse osmosis, different ways of getting all the hydrogenated halocarbons and the chlorine and everything out of the water. So just essentially what rainwater would be if the environment wasn't polluted.
Okay.
Now, in fairness, not everybody's a good candidate for that type of fasting. In order to determine if you're a good candidate, obviously you have to review the medical history and take a look at what people are doing in terms of their medical treatment, particularly in terms of medications. Basic laboratory testing to make sure kidney and liver function are intact or capable of adapting to fasting. And when people fast, they need to rest. If people are active, we've already mentioned, they'll increase their weight loss, but that weight will be derived from breaking down lean tissue. We want to minimize lean tissue, maximize fat, particularly visceral fat. It's also important that they be monitored because people do have issues that can be aggravated by fasting. Fasting presents a dehydration response. There's a physiological dehydration that occurs with fasting. There's changes in electrolytes. So you need to make sure that people are being monitored appropriately. And then the most important part probably is they need to be refed progressively.
Refed.
So when they're eating after the fast, if they go back to too rapid a refeeding, you can get into a problem with post-fasting edema. You can get refeeding syndrome. That could be a very serious or even potentially, fatal problem. That can be completely avoided by following a reasonable protocol of a realimentation after fasting, which is the reason why we encourage patients that are doing fasting to do it either in a controlled setting or under some supervision so that they don't make catastrophic errors in terms of how they do it.
When it's that length, when it's long.
Well, water fasting, we're doing fasting anywhere from 5 to 40 days. So anywhere in that range, you want to make sure the person's a good candidate, that they're fasting in a controlled setting, that they rest, and they refeed properly. So a person that has, let's say, a 20-day fast would have 10 days of controlled refeeding. It'll take about half the length of the fast to properly realiment after the fast so that you're ready to go back to hopefully a whole plant food, SOS-free type diet.
And when you say SOS, you mean sugar, salt, and oil for context.
Yeah, SOS is the international symbol of danger, but it also stands for the chemicals added to food that make people fat, sick, and miserable, and those are salt, oil, and sugar.
What kind of candidate would come to your clinic to do a 5 to 40-day water fast? What are the symptoms they have? What are the diseases, illnesses that they're suffering with?
Well, we get a variety of people and ages. The conditions we see are often the conditions that we've published papers on, because that's what people know us for. So one of the most common conditions is high blood pressure. We did a study with our colleague T. Colin Campbell. As I mentioned, 174 people in a row were able to achieve normal blood pressure without medication. We also did a prospective study recently with a colleague from the Mayo Clinic recently that we did 27 people completed fasting with hypertension. 26 were able to achieve normal blood pressure without any medication. One required half their dose of medication. And we had 6-week follow-ups where they did well. And then we followed them at a year. And we found that 76% of those people a year later had maintained their weight loss, and the majority were still normal blood pressure without medication.
Were they still fasting after a year?
No, of course, they were fasting while they were at the center. They were back eating a healthy diet, and they'd maintained a healthy enough for a year.
Right, TP smashed and smashed good. Good stuff for GBP CAT and Euro JPY is pushing up. While that is happening, I would like to come in and hit you with the word. Isaiah 41:10 NIV. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. All right. So imagine you're learning to walk on a high balance beam for the first time, and it is wobbly and you're afraid and you're doing good until you look down. And then you really become afraid and you feel scared. And you think basically I'm about to fall and bust all my stuff wide open. But then your young, strong dad or mom comes up right behind you and they put their hand right there on your back. And they hold you steady. And then they say to you in a small voice, I am right here. I've got you. And you're still on this high beam. But for some reason, now you're not afraid anymore. You know that they're with you. You know that they're behind you. You know that they're going to hold you up. You know they're going to stop you from falling. So this is the same thing. God gives us the same thing, and God gives us the same promise. Life can feel, wobbly. Life can feel like wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. But life isn't a balance beam, but it feels like one sometimes. We can get scared about stuff. We can be afraid about a test or a problem or a friendship or relationship or job or something in the news. Whatever. But God says, do not fear, for I am with you. Now, you might hear about something your president said or did, your insurance or finances. Not worried about that. God is with you. He is our God. And He is right here. He's ready to help us. He's ready to help you. We can be brave or not. And really, I say not because we are so balanced, but because this strong, righteous right hand is on our back. He's holding us steady. Okay. So with that being said, if you don't mind, pray with me. God, thank you for this amazing promise. When I feel afraid or dismayed today, And moving forward, please, please remind me that you are with me. And I do not have to be afraid or scared or worried. Please strengthen me, help me, and hold me up with your mighty hand so I will not be afraid. Amen. All right. Two TPs so far today. Schooly cool. Couple of minutes left. I'll play some more of this. And again, if you want me to
that they
share
were
it,
able to
I will.
maintain their
Let me
blood
know if you want me to
pressure
share the link,
and
and I
their
will.
weight loss. And that's very unusual because you don't find good long-term follow-up showing that people are not only able to get well, but sustain those behavioral changes.
So it's more of an intervention in that regard. And how long were they fasted for, those people?
So the people in that study ranged, the average fasting was about 2 weeks. So they had 2 weeks of fasting that normalized their blood pressure, a week of refeeding, and then even a year later, the majority were able to sustain the behavioral changes such that they were able to keep their weight off and they were able to keep their blood pressure down without the need for medication.
And what's going on there? Because there's physiological changes that take place. If I went and did a 40-day water fast with you, there's some physiological things that can happen. Of course, I'm going to go into ketosis. My fat's going to start to become my primary fuel source. But there's also going to be a physio-psychological relationship. There's going to be something that happens in my psychology. I mean, you talked about dopamine. My brain is going to change in some respect. My relationship with food is going to shift in some respect.
Absolutely. If you look at the outcome data, for example, we've got studies we've done with DEXA scanners that look at body composition changes during fasting. And so people that would say fast for 2 weeks would lose 10% of their total body weight, 20% of their total fat, but 40% of their visceral fat.
Visceral fat being the bad fat inside the
Yeah,
organs.
the 10% of fat that produces the inflammation that's thought to contribute to disease. Those same people would have only lost 6% of their lean tissue. Now, what's
Lean
interesting,
tissue.
like muscle, water,
Okay.
non-fat tissue.
Yeah.
So the lean tissue mass at 6 weeks was fully recovered, so that the percentage of their lean mass was actually higher at 6 weeks than it was at baseline. But the fat loss continues. So even though they're gaining weight after fasting, because they're putting their glycogen back in their muscles, which is about 2 pounds, they're rehydrating, they're putting fluid in, they're putting fiber back in the gut. So the scale's going up. But the fat loss, even with that weight gain, is continuing down. And so what you look at is their whole body composition begins to change. And also their brain composition too, probably, in terms of their functional relationship to themselves. For one thing, a lot of people feel that any kind of pain is a bad thing. Any kind of pain is a bad thing, and pain must always be avoided. If they have a pain, they have to take a pill, they have to do something, because pain's the evil, issue there. Athletes learn that pain isn't always bad, that sometimes discomfort can be associated with a positive response. We find it's easier working sometimes with athletes than people that have not been athletic, because they've learned to push their body a little bit. And fasting creates a hormetic effect as well, whereas there is some physiological stress that's introduced. That stress is associated with a healing response.
Would it not just be healthier if it were simple to take those people and remove all the processed food from their diet and then keep them on like a Mediterranean diet with like high protein, high fiber? Would that not be a more healthy intervention? Because at least then I'm not going to lose, you mentioned there I'd lose 6% of my lean tissue. At least then I wouldn't lose any muscle necessarily.
Well, I would agree that if your only goal is weight loss, diet and exercise are the key. Fasting introduces not just a chance to lose weight, but specifically to mobilize visceral fat. You will eventually mobilize that visceral
Hey,
fat with
take a look. Take a
exercise
look.
alone. There's an
Hey,
advantage to
take a
getting rid
look.
of
Hey,
that sooner rather
take a
than later,
look.
particularly for people that have high blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune disease, because the sooner you get rid of the visceral fat and the inflammation, the sooner you can get them off the medications. The medications
Hey,
themselves
take a look.
present their own problems. And people don't understand, if you have high blood pressure, you're being medicated not for your high blood pressure, but for the diet that causes the high blood pressure. Literally, the day you change the diet to a health-promoting diet, the need for medication begins to reduce. And if you don't reduce the medication adequately, you can actually shut people down from, consequences of excess medication.
Is there a different advantage between me doing the fast, the water fast, versus just going on the ketogenic diet if I was trying to reduce my visceral fat, which is that sort of stubborn fat around your organs?
Yes, water fasting is a more efficient method of mobilizing specifically visceral fat. And the other problem with that, when we talk about a ketogenic diet, remember there's a lot of different ways of getting into ketosis. You can do it with a high-fat, high-protein diet, which is commonly advocated. The dead Dr. Atkins diet, Ms. Soul rest in peace, or those kind of programs. Those have some disadvantages. High protein, particularly high animal protein, is actually thought to be one of the major contributing factors to many of these health compromises, including cardiovascular disease and cancer and inflammation and the rest of it. So we need protein. It's an essential nutrient. You need about 10% of your calories from protein. When you get excess protein, you put yourself at risk for kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, and other problems. We need fat. Essential fatty acids are a critical part of our ability to be healthy. And you also need carbohydrates. You're designed as a carbohydrate burning machine, but you get all the fat, all the protein, and all the carbohydrates you need from a whole plant food diet. You don't need to eat large amounts of animal foods. You don't need to eat oils. You don't need to eat refined carbohydrates to get the foods you need. And in fact, a whole plant food SOS-free diet gives you the quantity and quality of nutrients you need without some of the negative consequences or the risks of dietary excess that come from these more processed modern diets.
So if you were to pitch to me the unique selling points of a water fast at your clinic versus any other intervention, medical or lifestyle, it would be the speed in which you're able to burn visceral fat and the speed in which you're able to lower blood pressure is unlike anything else.
It also reduces insulin resistance. There is no drug that reduces insulin resistance, but fasting does. And a significant percentage of our type 2 diabetics will achieve normal blood sugar levels without the need for medication with fasting. Again, if you do diet and exercise consistently enough, long enough, you're likely to get many of the same benefits. There are some things, though, that seem to change in fasting that don't change as well with these modified feeding regimes. For example, fasting, when you have a computer and it gets corrupted and you turn it off and you turn it back on and you don't know why, but now it works. You've kind of rebooted or flashed the memory, whatever it is. Fasting does a similar thing in humans, it appears, and particularly when it comes to the gut microbiome. So you've got a trillion creatures, trillions of creatures living just in your intestinal tract, particularly bacteria, but all kinds of organisms that are an important part of your digestive mechanisms, your immune response. And they're different depending on what you eat. So if you're eating animal-based diet, you have different organisms than if you're on a plant-based diet. If you're on a high-sugar diet, even fruit sugars and things, you get different organisms flourishing than you would if you're in a fasting state. In a fasting state, there's a big drop-off in total organisms. And then when you refeed, depending on how you refeed, you can actually regrow those organisms and repopulate that.
I'm right in thinking if you do a water fast, you're going to wipe out a lot of the bacteria in your gut, including the bad ones, but also some
Hey,
good ones.
take a look.
And then you can reintroduce
Hey,
certain foods that will
take
bring
a
back the
look.
good bacteria.
That's why refeeding after fasting is so important. If you refeed carefully, you have a chance to reestablish that
Hey,
normal
take a
microflora
look.
balance. And that may be why we see such good response in many of these GI-related conditions, like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's
Hey,
disease and
take a
chronic
look.
constipation,
Hey,
irritable bowel
take a
syndrome.
look.
But you also
Hey,
see it
take a
affecting things
look.
like depression and anxiety. And probably they say 95% of the dopamine and serotonin that's produced by the body is actually produced in the gut. And so the balance in your gut microbiome may be critically involved in cognitive function as well as what's going on in the digestive system itself. So we're just now learning the impact that fasting has and the effect that microbiome has and the relationship that those two things have together.
There was a 2012 24 study that found after a 7-day water-only fast, levels of harmful fusobacteria dropped by more than 80%, and the gut microbiome shifted to a healthier balance. So it's clearly doing some of the work to wipe out some of the bad, unhealthy gut microbiome bacteria, which gives you an opportunity to, I guess, reset the gut microbiome, which is really interesting. Especially if you, as you say, you have some of those sort of gut-centric diseases. Is there a gender component to this between sort of men and women? Because obviously women have menstrual cycles and certain hormone fluctuations that men don't have. So do you have to think about gender when you're thinking about fasting?
Well, we know that women have complicated systems in different ways than men, and they have different diseases too that show up. Fibrocystic breast disease, dysmenorrhea, menorrhagia, polycystic ovarian syndrome, all of these conditions that males don't know anything about seem to be associated with excess estradiol hormones. When estradiol is high, there's a higher association with many of these conditions. Estradiol normally breaks down to something called estriol, and it's excreted in the urine. And what breaks it down is the gut microbiome and liver function. And the gut microbiome and liver function are both profoundly affected by fasting. For example, we've got in studies we've done looking at fatty liver disease, we show significant changes and reversal of fatty liver disease with fasting. And as I mentioned, the gut microbiome goes through a whole kind of rebooting. And that may be why patients that come in with those symptoms, the fibrocystic breast disease, the dysmenorrhea, the menorrhagia, et cetera, often get profound short-term improvement and long-term benefit post-fasting. Now, all of these things I'd have to say, fasting is great, but unless it's a motivating factor to make the diet and lifestyle changes, I wouldn't be optimistic about long-term outcomes. When we use fasting, we're also providing intense education to try to get people motivated to adopt healthy diet and lifestyle habits. And it's those diet.
All right, it is 1 after the hour, and I am about to get out of here. We are so close. If you in this trade, hope you lock some profit in. But that's it. All right. Thank y'all for joining again. Have a great day. Appreciate you.